So, you want to ride a motorcycle? Well, you've come to the right place, because this is the So You Want to Ride a Motorcycle podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1. I'm your host, Chris Geis, and I would say good evening because it's evening time for me, but this is a podcast after all, right? So you can listen anytime you want, so who knows what time of day it is for you. And I'm also hoping that this podcast is going to have a bit of a worldwide appeal because motorcycling is a worldwide topic. It's something that people are interested in from all walks of life and from all kinds of different places on this planet. So who knows what time it is where you are and where you're listening now. The title of this episode is, What's It All About? Now, many podcasts, and you may be, well, I don't know if you're familiar with many podcasts or how podcasts are produced, but I'm pretty familiar with a bunch of other motorcycle podcasts. And one of the things that generally seems to be the case is the host or hosts and co-hosts will record an episode and then based kind of on, what comes up in the episode and how things run, they'll kind of give it a title afterwards. What I'm going to try is going to start by announcing the title at the beginning of the episode. And I'm hoping if I do that before I start recording, it's going to help give me some direction and kind of keep me on track with the podcast. So I chose this title, What's It All About, for two reasons. It kind of has two meanings. One is the podcast itself. Like, what is this podcast all about? And I'm going to be getting into that in a little bit. Secondly, what's it all about for me? Like, what is motorcycling all about for me? And eventually, as I build an audience, I hope to find out what motorcycling is all about for you. So in this episode, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my goals for this podcast. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you how you can help me shape this podcast. So here's an interesting thing. So who's listening? So this is the first episode of my podcast. This is the first podcast I've ever done on my own. And so I don't have an audience yet. I have a prospective audience. I have an idea of what I think my audience is going to be and the kind of things that they're going to want to hear. But right now I'm in my studio, which happens to be my home office. Not particularly fancy, but I'm in my studio recording this. There's no one here but me. I don't have a co-host. I don't have a guest, although maybe I'll look at doing those things in the future. But it's kind of interesting just sitting here, looking at the microphone and my notes and the recorder as it's recording my voice and thinking about, okay, who's actually going to be hearing this episode? Well, whoever it is, it's you because you're listening now. And for sure, I hope you enjoy this and get something good out of it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about my audience or my prospective audience, the people that I'm trying to reach with this podcast. So I see the audience being people from all walks of life who simply are interested in riding motorcycles. So that could be people that never rode before but always wanted to. It could be people that had a bad experience riding and quit. Maybe people that stopped riding and want to get started riding again. And also people that want to help get more people riding, which is me. A lot of people, I think, fall into this category. Most people who ride motorcycles, no matter how long they've been riding, want to help get other people into the sport because it's just a lot of fun and it's a very rewarding thing to do. So I'm going to be very open-minded in this podcast, and I am just in general as a motorcycle rider. So motorcycles of all types are welcome. All two-wheeled vehicles, and yes, even three-wheeled vehicles are okay, right? So you've got three-wheeler motorcycles and spiders and things of that sort. Okay, so if the vehicle has a steering wheel, yeah, I don't exactly consider it to be a motorcycle or in that category, but hey, whatever you ride is cool. Whatever gets you out on the road, enjoying the environment, enjoying the views, enjoying the scenery, listening to some music is kind of all good. But this is a motorcycle podcast. And I hope this podcast is going to appeal to everyone in the motorcycling community because the more listeners I have, the better. And the more motorcyclists we have, the better. And I'll be getting into that in future episodes. Okay, so now the disclaimer. Well, nowadays, everyone has to have a disclaimer. And I'm kind of just coming at this from a humorous point of view. But in the interest of telling you about myself. So I am not yet an expert writer. I have been writing for 3 years, but I do not yet consider myself an expert, nor am I an instructor. So my goal in this podcast is to share with you my experiences as a motorcyclist and the things that I do, the things that I find work for me, the things that I find are common sense, the things that I've picked up along the road. But when it comes to, actual instruction or technique or, courses and things, I will help point you to the right resources for that. Whether you're looking for instruction like books, videos, and etc., or training, because there are definitely riders, with more experience than I who are also experienced, at teaching others to ride. So I see my place or my focus in this whole thing as helping, like I said, my audience, the people I outlined at the beginning of the show, new riders, returning riders, people that want to help others learn how to ride. Basically be kind of a central point that people can come and I will help you find the information you're looking for. There's a lot of good content out there nowadays. You found this podcast on the internet, I'm sure. And, if you do anything with Google or anything looking on the internet, the internet is just rich with resources. Now, of course, like anything, there's stuff out there that's not so good, and I will try to help steer you away from that. But there's so much good content out there. There's so many dedicated motorcyclists that want to help you, just improve at whether you've never ridden a motorcycle before or you want to improve as a motorcyclist, or like I said, you're coming back and you want to refresh your skills. There's a lot of excellent people out there and some really good resources. And so my interest is not in reinventing the wheel and redoing something that's been done very well, but more just as a person that can help just point you in the right direction. So I kind of become a place that you can come when you're looking for answers and when you're looking for help, and I'm going to help you find it. Okay, so now I want to get a little bit into why I started this podcast. First of all, I love riding, and I just want to help others enjoy it as much as I do. Like I said before, I've been riding for about 3 years, going on 3 years, and so I have enough experience now that I feel that I have something to say to others about the activity of motorcycling. No, I'm not an expert, but I've certainly come a long way. I've learned a lot, and, I have a lot of experiences to share. And so, again, my goal is to just help everyone, wherever you're at, just enjoy the activity and the sport of motorcycling more. And the thing, too, is you have interesting things to say. And whether you're just starting out or you've been riding for 20 years, you have interesting things to say about this subject. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences. And I want to hear about them. So I want to encourage you to talk about them. And so one of the things I'm planning to do as part of this podcast is interview different riders, different listeners. So if that's something you're interested in, and honestly, it's fine. Like if you've never ridden a motorcycle before, that's fine. Like let me know if you'd like to come on the show and talk about why you want to ride a motorcycle or what difficulties you're having or what concerns you have or what fears you have or whatever it may be. Let me know. At the end of the show, I'll give you the email address you can contact, but definitely let me know. Or you're an experienced rider and you want to share your experiences about how you got started and what you think people should be looking out for and what people should be doing when they're new to the sport. And especially if you're a coach or an instructor or a track day rider or, anyone who's involved in helping others in the activity and the sport of motorcycling, let me know because I'd love to have you on the show as well. So again, my thing is I just want to do my part to continue to build this community. Motorcycling is just an awesome, awesome thing to do. And whatever I can do to help build that community and help give back is what I'm looking to do. So I've been listening to motorcycle podcasts pretty much as long as I've been motorcycling. And like early on, when I first had the interest and I first got involved in the sport, I knew that I needed to learn more about it. I just wanted to learn more about it. I was kind of a sponge for just absorbing information. And I found podcasts to be a really great way to do that. In part because I work professionally as a computer programmer, and it's a kind of job where I love what I do, but it can get a little bit dull at times, just kind of sitting in front of a computer. And my mind is not enough occupied with what I'm doing. I'm focused on my work and what I'm doing. But, there's that little bit that, hey, something else could be going on. Sometimes I would listen to music and things of that sort. And, sometimes I would listen to things on Netflix and whatever. But I was like, hey, I'm getting interested now in this new sport, this new subject, and let's see what we can find out about it. And so I started searching for podcasts, and it was really a tremendous, tremendous help. In fact, I've made a lot of friends just listening to podcasts and reaching out to shows and being, contacting people, podcasters. And, I've been on a couple other podcasts. I'm a co-host on a podcast, all of which kind of led to me doing this. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, but all of that help build, just enough experience and confidence. I'm like, hey, I can finally branch off and do this myself. And like I said, a big part of this is really just wanting to give back, because I just find there's only so long I can kind of inflow and take in. And that's really good, to get educated. But it comes a point where it's like, okay, so many people have assisted me. So many people have helped me. It's time to turn this around. Let's reverse the flow. Let's give back a little bit. And so I definitely hope that this podcast will achieve that. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the artwork that I designed for this podcast. So one thing I learned, and I'm still learning. There's lots and lots to learn. Like any new subject, podcasting, there's lots and lots of things to learn. But one of the things I've learned is when you launch a new podcast, you usually want to have a couple episodes in the can, so to speak, that you can kind of make available, to the podcasting channels all in one shot. So whatever that number happens to be, 3, 5, 7 episodes. Because this way, when people subscribe to your podcast, with their podcast player or whatever, they see that there's something established there. If you kind of throw out one episode and they kind of come and they listen to that and then say, okay, well, that was nice, but, maybe they don't bother to subscribe to the channel, or, they don't come back again. But I do want to start getting my podcast out there. So point being that, early listeners of this podcast, and hopefully you've found this on, one of the major podcast delivery services, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or whatever it happens to be. But the very early listeners will have found this through my posts on my Facebook page and on Twitter, and just by finding it on my website. But anyway, so what I just want to talk about is why I chose this particular artwork and kind of what it means to me. And if this is something that may change, hey, this podcast is new. This is the early stages. I have a lot of ideas and a lot of things trying to get together, but I didn't want to spend too much time perfecting everything. And more importantly, I wanted to kind of get started with my ideas and then let this show kind of grow organically, find out what people think about it, what the feedback is, what they like, what they don't like, what they want to hear about, what I didn't think to cover that they're interested in. And so you'll see this podcast change, whether it's the intro music or the intro, my voiceover, or it's the artwork, is going to change over time, hopefully, as I kind of fine tune it and tweak it to better meet the needs of my audience. But anyway, so all that said, so hopefully, well, if you're driving in the car or you're riding on your motorcycle, okay, please do not be looking at this artwork. But, if you happen to be on a train or you're a passenger in a car or you're at work or something, okay, give a glance to the artwork or take a look when you get a chance. But so basically what I have here is a photograph I took out in Arizona. It's kind of the Arizona desert with the mountains. It's got some cactus and stuff. And it's like a 2-lane highway, divided yellow line. And then I've got this big, giant red question mark. And it says, so you want to ride a motorcycle? So the concept behind this, and actually in developing the podcast, I had put this graphic out on Facebook, and I asked, friends and associates for some feedback. And generally the feedback was good, but, people had different constructive criticism things. Some people like, well, how come there's no motorcyclist on the road? And, whatever. Some people weren't so crazy about the color scheme and whatever. And all that can be tweaked. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what this image means to me and why I chose this. Okay, so first of all, the big red question mark. Well, I chose that because I think people, particularly people new to anything, but this is a motorcycle podcast, right? So people new to motorcycling have lots of questions. And so I want this podcast to be an open dialogue and a constant discussion about the things that people want to hear about, the questions that are unanswered, the things that they're trying to figure out and haven't quite mastered kind of thing. And so, long story short, I want to help you get your questions answered. Now, the reason for the photograph, and it's kind of deserted looking, and there are no riders on the road. I'd prefer to see motorcyclists there too, but one of the things I realized, and I think it applies a little bit to me when I first started out, and I think to anyone who's starting on a new endeavor or a new adventure or a new learning experience, is it can look a little bleak and desolate. It's kind of like you're starting from scratch. It's like this brand new adventure, and it's like, where am I going? And, how am I going to get there? And what do I need to take with me? And what equipment and what skills do I need? And all these kind of things. And it can kind of look a little deserted and bleak. And so I thought the image fit. So whether or not I've succeeded at this, I will find out as I get feedback from my audience on it, right? But so I just wanted to give you just a little background on why I went with the artwork the way it is. So by all means, let me know. Write in, drop me a line on Facebook, the contact page on the website. Shoot me an email. You can tweet me, whatever you want to do, and let me know what you think of the graphic. You like it, you don't like it, what you would change, what you would do different, and we'll see. Maybe this will evolve over time. All right, so now I want to get a little bit into what I ride. So at age 53, in a somewhat adventurous leap, well, I don't know. I guess anyone that starts motorcycling is on an adventure, no matter what age it is. But I started riding in the summer of 2016. And after doing the basic rider course, where I learned to ride and actually was able to get the motorcycle endorsement for my license. I'm in New York State, so I got a New York State motorcycle endorsement on my license. I went out and I bought a motorcycle. Happened to buy a new motorcycle, and in a future episode I will talk about why. It's not really pertinent right now, but I started out on a 2016 Kawasaki Vulcan S, which is a parallel twin engine 650cc, which I think was a really good bike to start learning on. It's basically what it's considered a sport cruiser. And then in March of 2018, I upgraded to a 2018 Kawasaki Z900 RS, which is an inline four-cylinder engine. And one thing I did want to point out, because I haven't mentioned it yet, is I am so far strictly a road rider. I ride on the road. I have not ridden off-road, although it's something I would like to try. Let's see, I haven't ridden in the desert. I haven't ridden on ice, and et cetera, et cetera. But I do have 3 years under my belt. I would say at this point, between the two bikes and a couple other bikes I've tried here and there, about 8,000 miles. Now, compared to some riders, like I know guys that I'm friends with online and whatnot who, easily do 20,000 miles a year on a motorcycle. There are people who do, and some of you may be familiar with this, well, many of you may be familiar with this, but people new to the sport may not. There's something called the Iron Butt Association, and they sponsor all kinds of kind of endurance rides, and I won't go into the details right now, but one of the things they have is what's called a Saddle Sore 1000, where basically you complete 1,000 miles of riding within a 24-hour period. So, I kind of look at that and put it in perspective. It's like, okay, so in my 3 years of riding, I've done, like, let's say about 8,000 miles. That's like 8 saddle sores. I mean, for some riders, they would bang that out in a month or something like that. But here's the thing is, while, such people are definitely more experienced riders, for me, it's not about the miles per se. And for some people it is, and that's cool. There's all kinds of types and styles of riding. For me, it's about the experience. I ride when I can ride. I happen to work in New York City, and I commute by train, and, I leave early in the morning. So commuting by motorcycle is not an option, and especially for me, that early in the morning would not be a lot of fun. So my riding is basically on the weekends and kind of whenever I can squeeze it in. So I don't worry so much about the miles I ride. It's more to me about the quality of the ride. So when I do get, a couple hours or half a day or a weekend on a rare occasion, and I can just go out and ride, I just want it to be the best quality ride I can have, enjoyable and fun and safe, but, thrilling and exciting at the same time. So ever since I was a kid, I can remember I love motorcycles. I don't know. I had motorcycle toys as a kid, like little Matchbox cars, and then, larger ones. And I always loved the sound of a motorcycle, and, seeing them go by. If it was in the car with the family, it was always cool to see them on the road. But obviously it took me 53 years to get started riding. So like, what's that all about? I don't know. I'm not going to overanalyze it because I don't think it's all that important. The important thing is that I do ride. But in looking back at it, I was thinking about a few things that I think did factor into my waiting, to a later part of life to ride. So one of those things was, I think I always just had in the back of my mind, and it wasn't like a conscious thought I was always, thinking about or really looking at, but I think in the back of my mind, I was afraid I was going to kill myself. And more because of, maybe I was afraid I wouldn't be able to control the urge to like pin the throttle and go as fast as I could and overtake a turn, and who knows where that came from exactly. I don't know. What I do know is, growing up through, like high school, well, actually junior high school, I had heard of some bad experiences. So when I was growing up, I was, friends with a bunch of the kids in the neighborhood. But one of the families, it was a family of four boys and one or two girls. And I remember with that family, two things that stuck out in my mind. One of them, that the oldest brother had actually had a motorcycle accident. I don't remember much at all about the motorcycle he was riding. I just remember it looked really cool. I don't know what it was. It was probably like a 350, 500cc motorcycle, something like that. But he did have an accident, I believe, with a car and ended up with a broken leg. And I remember seeing him, hobble around on crutches for, it seemed like months and months and months. And I was like, wow, that's not cool. That doesn't look like a fun way to live. I mean, he wasn't really particularly suffering from it, and he didn't seem really upset. But I was like, okay, well, that looks kind of dangerous. And then the second oldest brother, and I don't remember if it was before or after. I think it was after. Was riding a mini bike, around the house. This house was at a cul-de-sac, right? So it was kind of the end of a road, with just a circular part, like a, what do you call it? A court. And he was riding a mini bike, and I don't know, he rode up on the neighbor's lawn and somehow had some kind of difficulty and fell off and ended up cutting up his leg from the chain of the mini bike. And that was another kind of thing. It was a little traumatic, especially. It wasn't all that, it was probably 12, 13 years old, and, see someone, it wasn't my friend, but my friend's brother, and kind of see him injured and, the blood and the whole thing was kind of a bit of a mess. So, I guess in retrospect, kind of, not motorcycling and not knowing anyone else that did ride a motorcycle, and then seeing those kind of things, I guess I kind of associated in my mind, well, this is kind of a dangerous activity, and maybe that kind of stuck with me. And then even, I guess, at a slightly earlier age, again, I was probably 10 years old. I just remember being upstate New York with my family, and we were visiting a friend of my dad's, and he had a motorcycle. And so I was like, hey, you guys want to take out the motorcycle? And so I don't ask me how this thing developed, because looking back at it, doesn't sound like the smartest thing. But so it's like nighttime, and so this guy pulls out the motorcycle, and mind you, my dad had never ridden before, right? So he's got it out in the back of the house, kind of on a dirt road behind the house, and it's like, okay, so hop on, and so this is what you do, and this is the throttle, and this is the brake, and the whole thing. And my dad's like, okay, come hop on, and so I hop on, and whatever. I mean, like I said, I was like 10 years old and sitting on the back. I couldn't really see because my eyes were right in the back of my dad's back. And but anyway, all I know is he takes off, and the tire's spinning, kicking up dirt and rocks and stuff like that, and we just go flying down this dirt country road. It seemed like 100 miles an hour. I'm sure it wasn't. It was probably 20, maybe it was 30 miles an hour. And then all of a sudden, it's nighttime, right? So now, in the light that's cast by the headlight, and I guess maybe I had kind of leaned over a little bit, because I kind of remember seeing this vision of, it was some kind of fallen tree or something that was across the road. So we come speeding up to this thing, and he slams on the brakes, and okay, neither of us got hurt, and he stopped in time. But it was kind of another thing. It was like wow, that this is like a dangerous activity. So I guess the point I'm getting to here is, depending on how you're exposed to motorcycling is going to have a big effect on how you think about it. And so to me, in the back of my mind, I guess it was something that like, hey, this is a dangerous activity. People get hurt at this. You could get killed doing this without having the balancing side of, hey, if you learn how to do this properly and you wear the right gear and you get yourself educated and you find people that know what they're doing already and they instruct you that, hey, this can be a really enjoyable, fulfilling activity. And so, again, I don't know, depending on who's out in the audience there, you will all have heard different stories. You'll have had different experiences. You may know people who were injured motorcycling. You may know people who died motorcycling. If so, that's tragic, and that's not a good thing. You never want to hear that kind of thing. But unfortunately, that is part of life. And so it's a matter of just deciding, what do you want to get out of life? What are your priorities? What are the things you enjoy? And just kind of take it from there and just be sure whatever it is you do, whether it's motorcycling or something else, just educate yourself, be aware of the risks, understand, how you can mitigate the risks, how do you reduce them, and how do you protect yourself, in case something does go wrong. So how did I get hooked on this activity that so many of us motorcyclists enjoy so much? Well, to be honest, it was my girlfriend's fault. And but I love her for it, and thank God she pushed the way she did. And let me explain. She didn't push to make me ride, but basically what happened was it was quite a few years ago. Let's say, I guess probably about 4, maybe 5 years ago. She had mentioned to me that she was interested in riding again. When she was maybe in her later teens, early 20s. She had a motorcycle for a while, and she rode a little bit, and she hung out with people that rode, and she'd been on the back of motorcycles and things like that, and she really loved that way of life and the activity of motorcycling. And things happen, and she got married and she started a family, and so that kind of, I guess, fell to the back burner kind of thing. But so it was a couple of years ago. She was like, hey, I really want to get back to doing it again. I was like, wow, that sounds cool. Hey, maybe for her, I believe it was her birthday. It was either birthday or Christmas. I was like, well, let me, as a gift, get her a motorcycle instruction course, because she was interested in getting some instruction and learning more about how to ride, and to kind of learn about and overcome some things that she had run into when she was riding at an earlier age. So I was like, wow, this would be a really cool gift. So I bought her what's called a basic rider course, which is provided by the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. And I'll put these things in the show notes so that you have access to the links and whatnot. But I was like, you know what? It was a weekend course. And I was like, well, if she's going to do it, what the heck? Why don't I do it? It sounds like a really cool couples thing to do. And, like I said before, I always liked motorcycles. I just somehow never got around to learning how to ride. So I joined her. So we did this weekend course together. And it was a little bit of classroom instruction and whatever, and kind of orientation. And then they take you out, and okay, so here's the bikes, and everyone pick a bike. And I was pretty much the tallest one. I'm about 6 foot tall. I guess was the tallest, one of the taller people in the class. And it was a good mix. I think it was about 8 or 10 people, men and women, of different ages and different backgrounds and whatever. And so I believe it was either the instructor or one of the students that said, hey, you're taller, why don't you take that bike? Which I remember was a Suzuki. I think it was probably like a 250cc, kind of like not really a dirt bike, but maybe a dual sport kind of thing. Like the kind of bike, street legal, you could ride it on the road, but, if you took it off onto some dirt roads or trails or whatever, it would be well suited. But so here's the thing. So, walk up to the bike, grab the handlebars, throw my leg over, and it was just an interesting thing. From that moment, just throwing my leg over and sitting down on the seat, I was like, that's it. I'm hooked. I'm doing this. I don't care what's involved. I don't care how long it takes to learn how to do this properly. I'm doing this. It was just like a really interesting experience. So whether that means it's in the DNA, whatever, I don't know. But it just was like, wow, like this is really something that I want to do. Okay, so back to the title of the show. What's it all about? Like, what's it all about for me? Why do I ride? Well, there's a lot of answers to that question, but one, it's just calming and relaxing. It's an interesting thing, and probably most riders know this feeling or this sensation, and people who haven't ridden but are going to hopefully soon will experience it as well. But when I put on my gear, when I put on my jacket and especially when I put on my helmet, like before I've even started the bike, just everything else fades away. And it's actually, this can be a controversial thing, right? Wearing gear, and you'll hear people talk about ATGAT, all the gear all the time, and it's a controversial thing for some. And there are some states that require helmets to be worn, and there's some states that don't. And like I know people who they ride a helmet in a state if they have to, but the minute they cross the state line, the helmet comes off because they don't have to wear one. And some people don't do that. Like me, I always wear a helmet. But whatever, that's an individual choice, and I'll probably take that up in a future episode. But the point is, I like wearing gear because it gets me in the right mindset. It's like I put on the jacket, I put on the helmet, I put on the gloves, and it's like, okay, I'm motorcycling now. That's where my attention goes. It's time to ride, and that's what I'm going to be doing. And I think that's in part why motorcycling can be so therapeutic for people, because it's like it brings your attention to the here and now. It pulls you to present time, whatever your problems and your difficulties and whatever, as real as they may be. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this riding thing right now. And if you're a good rider, even if you're not super experienced, but if you're a good rider, if you're a smart rider, you know that when you're riding a motorcycle, that's what you're doing. You're not doing anything else. You're not thinking about the laundry, and you're not thinking about how your day went at work, and you're not thinking about whatever, that the kid's not doing so good in school kind of thing. Because in order to be safe, particularly on a motorcycle, and this applies to driving in general, even a vehicle, but particularly on a motorcycle, because you're so much more vulnerable, you have to be in the moment. You have to be paying attention. You have to know what's going on. And so if you're riding properly, right, and you're following this approach, like it just snaps you out of whatever problems you have. And for me, at least, that's why I find it to be so therapeutic. I just love the sense of motion. It's just different. It's different from driving a car. Many years ago, I had a jet ski. Actually it was a Polaris personal watercraft, which was a really cool vehicle to have. And in part, looking back at it, after I started motorcycling, I was like, wow, that actually was kind of a substitute for me for having a motorcycle, because I didn't have one yet. Because I remember riding up the Hudson River in New York, and just riding up the river, really good clip, carving turns back and forth. It was just really just enjoyable, relaxing thing to do. And so also on a motorcycle, unlike a car, and you hear everybody talks about this. This is not unique to my experience. People will tell you it's like it's more visceral because you're more connected with the environment. You even if you're wearing gear, you feel the wind. You feel the wind pressure. You hear the wind. You smell. Sometimes not so good, but usually the good smells and things in the environment. You're a lot more connected with the environment. You're a lot more connected with the experience, and you're using your body to control the vehicle. In a car, okay, you've got pedals and a steering wheel, and yes, it does take skill, and yes, you do have to control it, but it's not like riding a motorcycle where, you have to lean your body to get the bike to lean, and it's just you're more connected. You feel more connected to the vehicle, more like you're kind of one with it, and it's just, honestly, it's a rush. It just can be such a rush. It's even if you're not going super fast, even if you're not carving turns, or taking nice sweepers and whatever, which is enjoyable too, but it just can be a total rush. And so if you ride, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't ridden yet, I sure hope you'll experience it. And I think maybe that's kind of the distinguishing thing, is the people who do connect with that and the people who do experience it are probably the ones that stick with it. And the ones that doesn't happen, well, that's fine too. Maybe that's just not for you. There's lots of things to do in life, and not everyone's a motorcyclist, but if you are, if it's something you enjoy, you'll find out. And then, like I said, hopefully this podcast is going to help you enjoy it even more. I also love to ride because it gets me out seeing things. I've always liked to travel. From the time I was, early teens, 12, 13, something like that. I used to ride a bicycle everywhere, 10-speed, 12-speed bicycle. Later in life, got interested in other things. I bought a mountain bike and I started doing that, so which I would ride on the road, and also off-road, which is a blast. But you can't quite cover the miles with a bicycle, or a mountain bike that you can with a motorcycle. And so that's the thing too. Like if you like to travel, if you like the outdoors, if you like nature, if you like scenery, it's just a beautiful, beautiful way to travel. So that's a little bit about me, or maybe a lot about me. I think about 38 minutes into the show, which is actually kind of cool because when I outlined this, I wasn't sure I had enough to talk about to cover 15 minutes. So hopefully you're still with me, and hopefully this is interesting, and hopefully you're getting something out of this. But like I said, this show is not about me. This show is about you. And I want to engage you, my audience, as much as possible to help shape this show. So I want to hear from you, like what you need and want that you're not already getting. And again, whether you've never ridden, or you're a new rider, or an experienced rider, or someone who's teaching others to ride, it's not that I can necessarily help so much with those things because I'm not a super experienced rider, and I don't yet teach others to ride, although it's something I'm interested in doing. But still, like I said, I would kind of like to be a go-to person, or have this podcast be a go-to place that, people are like, hey, here's a problem I'm dealing with. Here's something I'm struggling with, whatever it happens to be, because I'm trying to create a community of all of those types of riders. And so, I'd kind of like to be the place where people can come get the answers. And again, if the answer's already out there, if there's an awesome book or an awesome video or a podcast and I know about it, I'm going to point you to it. If there isn't, there's kind of a gap, there's something that's missing, well, I'm going to do what I can to try to fill it in. So definitely, so contact me and definitely let me know. So the format of this podcast, I'm not totally decided. And again, this will in part be based on the feedback I get from you people. So I'm thinking probably it's going to be a once a week podcast. This one is looking like it's maybe going to be 45 minutes by the time I'm done. So probably once a week, 45 minutes to an hour. But I do want to hear what you'd prefer. Do you like a podcast that long? Would you rather have a podcast that's shorter? Maybe take something like this and break it up into 15-minute or 30-minute segments, depending on, how you listen and when you can listen. That might be more practical. But let me know. I will kind of have to go by the consensus. Obviously, something like this, I can't meet everybody's needs, but I certainly will do the best I can to meet, kind of the general needs of everybody. And I'll just keep developing this thing as far as it'll take us. So I definitely want you to write in and, tell me about the show. Tell me how you liked this first episode. Tell me what you need help with. Tell me what you'd like to hear about in the future. So you can email me at soyouwantaride@yahoo.com. That's one word, soyouwantaride. You can also find information on my website, soyouwantorideamotorcycle.com. Also one word, so you want to ride a motorcycle. And you'll find all my information and links there. There's a little bit of a bio. I haven't done any yet, but I'm going to have a blog there. One feature I do want to do is I'm going to do something called Bike of the Week. So I'll be, posting pictures of motorcycles that people want to share. Future episodes, I'll give you some more specifics on that. But you'll find all the links on the website. So the email address, there's a contact us form. You'll find the address for Facebook and Instagram, and I've got a Twitter account, but there's a little glitch there that I've got to get straightened out. So I don't want to put it up before I get that all totally worked out. And like I said earlier at the beginning of the show, write in and let me know if you'd like to be a guest. And then before I close out, I just want to mention, how I'm going to measure the success of this podcast. And the basic way I'm going to do that is by how many people let me know either that they started riding, that they returned to riding, that they overcame some fear or limitation that they had or they felt they had with their riding, or someone who says, hey, I got someone else riding. I want to hear about all of it. And so I'm hoping, week by week to hear more and more and more good news in that direction. And if that's the case, then I'll know I'm doing this the right way. So in closing, I just wanted to thank everyone for listening to this first episode. It's actually been a lot of fun recording this. Like I mentioned earlier, it's something I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and maybe in a future episode I'll talk some more about that. But it's a little bit of a kind of a dream come true, I guess. So like I said, you can definitely contact me at soyouwantaride@yahoo.com. or at the website, soyouwantaride-a-motorcycle.com. And I thank you all for listening. And just remember, it's always time to ride.